Ryan thought he had it all figured out. He was tired of struggling, tired of barely making ends meet. So when a wealthy older woman made him an offer too tempting to refuse, he saw it as his way out. But what he didn't realize was that choices like these come with consequences. And a year later, when he saw another man standing where he should have been, he finally understood the true cost of his betrayal. Before we dive into this heartbreaking story, let me know where you're watching from today. The rain had started just as Ryan stepped off the bus. A slow drizzle at first, then a steady downpour that drenched his thin jacket in minutes. He pulled it tighter around himself, cursing under his breath as he walked the last 2 blocks home. Home. The small apartment he shared with Elena was supposed to be temporary, a stepping stone to something bigger. They had moved in with dreams, bright, foolish dreams of success, of building a life together. But now, after 4 years of scraping by, it felt like a prison. By the time he reached the door, his shoes were soaked, his body cold, and his mood even colder. He hesitated for a second, taking a deep breath before pushing the key into the lock. He could already hear the faint hum of the TV inside, the low murmur of Elena's voice, as she probably mumbled along with some old romantic movie. She always did that, talked to the characters like they were real. It used to make him smile. Now, it just made him feel tired. The door creaked as he stepped in. Warmth from the small heater near the couch hit him instantly, the scent of something faintly burnt lingering in the air. Probably another one of Elena's experimental dinners. She looked up from the couch, her eyes lighting up the second she saw him. "You're home late." "Yeah," he shrugged, toeing off his wet shoes. "Work ran over." A lie. Work had ended hours ago, but he couldn't bring himself to come straight home. Not to this. Not yet. Elena pushed off the couch, padding toward him in her worn-out socks, her oversized sweater hanging off one shoulder. She looked soft, warm, like home. She always did. "I made dinner," she said, a hopeful lilt in her voice. "It didn't turn out exactly how I planned, but it's edible." Ryan forced a smile. "I'll eat later." Her face fell for just a fraction of a second before she recovered, nodding. "Okay. Do you want some tea? Coffee?" "No, I just need a minute," he sighed, walking past her toward the tiny kitchen. The overhead light flickered, casting shadows over the stack of unpaid bills on the table. They sat there, mocking him, waiting for a paycheck that had already been stretched too thin. Rent, utilities, groceries, the credit card payment he had barely managed to cover last month. His jaw clenched as he picked up an envelope, flipping it over in his hands. Past due. Another one. He rubbed his temple, feeling the familiar weight of exhaustion settle over him. Elena leaned against the counter, watching him carefully. "It's not as bad as it looks." She hesitated before stepping closer, placing a hand on his arm. "We'll figure it out, Rye." Her optimism made something sharp twist in his chest. He used to believe that too, that no matter what, they'd make it work, that love was enough. But love didn't keep the lights on. Love didn't stop the landlord from knocking. Love didn't silence the hum of envy that grew louder in his mind every time he saw one of his coworkers pull up in a new car or talk about some vacation they were planning. Love didn't fix the fact that he was drowning, and she was too damn trusting to see it. He pulled away, running a hand down his face. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Elena." She stiffened. "Do what?" "This." He gestured around, the smallness of their world suffocating him. "Living paycheck to paycheck, counting every cent, pretending like we're not stuck in the same place we were years ago." Elena's face softened. "We're not stuck, Ryan. We're building something. It just takes time." "Time?" He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "How much more time? How long until we can actually breathe? Until I don't feel like a failure every damn day?" Her brows pulled together, hurt flickering across her features. "You're not a failure. Feels like I am." The words came out harsher than he intended, but he didn't take them back. She reached for his hand again, squeezing it. "Rye, I married you because I love you, not because of how much money we have, not because of where we live or what car we drive. None of that matters to me." "Yeah, well, it matters to me." Silence settled between them, heavy, unspoken words hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. After a long pause, she exhaled, stepping back. "I know you're stressed. I know this isn't easy, but we're in this together." Ryan swallowed, looking at her. She meant it, but standing there, staring at the woman who still believed in him despite everything, all he felt was guilt. Guilt for wanting more. Guilt for feeling like it wasn't enough. Guilt for knowing that deep down, he had already started looking for a way out. The gala was nothing like Ryan's world. He adjusted the stiff security badge clipped to his black blazer, his fingers tightening around the earpiece wire that ran under his collar. All around him, the city's elite floated through the grand ballroom, wrapped in shimmering gowns and sharp tuxedos, laughing over glasses of champagne that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Every inch of the venue oozed wealth, the kind that didn't just buy comfort, it bought power. Ryan exhaled slowly, keeping his posture straight, his hands clasped behind his back like he had been trained to do. He wasn't supposed to be noticed. Security at these events was meant to be invisible, blending into the background while making sure the rich and powerful enjoyed their night, without a second thought about safety. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He was invisible. He watched as men not much older than him, dressed in sleek designer suits, discussed investments and luxury cars over glasses of bourbon, their wives draped in diamonds, laughing without a single worry in the world. It wasn't fair. Ryan had worked just as hard, harder probably. Yet here he was, standing on the outside looking in, making barely enough to keep his life together. He could feel the resentment building in his chest, burning hot and bitter. He didn't belong here, and yet he wanted to. Careful with that expression, a smooth, sultry voice cut through his thoughts. Ryan blinked, turning his head slightly. She stood just a few feet away, watching him with a knowing smirk. Vanessa. She was the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. Older, maybe late 40s, but the years had only refined her beauty. Her dark red gown clung to her figure like it had been made for her, the deep slit in the side revealing toned legs that barely brushed against the marble floor as she stepped closer. Her jewelry wasn't just expensive, it was chosen with purpose, subtle, but enough to make it clear she was someone. Ryan cleared his throat, shifting his stance slightly. Sorry, she smiled, taking a slow sip from her champagne flute before tilting her head. That look in your eyes. He frowned. What look? The one that says you're wondering why them and not you. Ryan stiffened. He had been careful not to let his thoughts show, but she had seen right through him. I don't know what you mean, he muttered, glancing away. She chuckled, a deep velvety sound that somehow made him feel even more exposed. Relax, darling. You don't have to pretend with me. Ryan wasn't sure how to respond. There was something about her presence that was unnerving, as if she knew things about him he hadn't even admitted to himself yet. She stepped closer, her gaze sweeping over him in a slow, deliberate assessment. You're different from the other men working here. I doubt that, he said flatly. Oh, but you are, Vanessa mused, swirling her champagne. Most men in your position are content. They accept their place, grateful for whatever scraps the world throws their way. She paused, her eyes locking onto his. But you're hungry. Ryan's jaw clenched. He didn't know why, but hearing her say it, acknowledging the very thing he had been trying to bury, it hit somewhere deep. She smiled like she had already won something. Come, he hesitated. I'm on duty. Vanessa raised an eyebrow, amused. Please, you and I both know the real security is posted at the exits. You're just here to make sure no one gets too rowdy. Ryan exhaled through his nose, his body rigid with conflict. She leaned in slightly, her voice softer now. 10 minutes. A drink. I promise. It'll be worth your time. He shouldn't. He knew that. But before he could talk himself out of it, he found himself nodding. Vanessa led him through a side entrance, away from the main ballroom, down a hallway lined with dark wood paneling. The sound of the party dulled behind them, replaced with a quieter, more intimate atmosphere. A private lounge, dim lighting, plush velvet seating. A grand piano sat in the corner, untouched. The air smelled like aged whiskey and something floral, a scent that clung to Vanessa as she lowered herself onto one of the couches, crossing her legs elegantly. Ryan hesitated before sitting across from her. He wasn't supposed to be here. He knew that. Vanessa didn't say anything at first, simply watching him with quiet amusement as a server placed 2 glasses of whiskey on the table between them, the kind of whiskey he had only ever seen in magazines. Ryan glanced at the drink. I can't afford this. Her smirk deepened. Good thing you don't have to. He swallowed, picking up the glass. The liquid was rich and smooth as it burned down his throat. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, resting her elbow on the arm of the couch, her chin on her hand. Tell me something, Ryan. Do you ever wonder what it would be like? He looked at her warily. What? To have more. His fingers tightened around the glass. Vanessa smiled. You work hard, don't you? You do everything right. And yet, here you are, wearing a rented suit, making sure rich men don't spill their drinks while they talk about deals worth millions. Ryan didn't answer. Vanessa studied him for a moment before leaning back, swirling her whiskey lazily. You deserve more, Ryan. He let out a breath. And what? You think you can give it to me? Oh, darling. Her smile was slow, deliberate. I know I can. A chill ran down his spine. She hadn't said how. She didn't need to, because the way she looked at him, the way her voice dripped with certainty, made it clear she already had a plan. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a vast, open penthouse that felt more like a kingdom in the sky than an apartment. Ryan stepped forward hesitantly, his worn-out shoes sinking into the plush white carpet. The contrast between where he stood now and where he had come from, was almost laughable. Vanessa stood by the bar, pouring 2 glasses of dark amber liquid. She was barefoot, her silk robe tied loosely at the waist, revealing smooth legs and a glimpse of the satin slip underneath. "You look tense," she observed, handing him a glass. Ryan took it, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I wasn't sure why you asked me here." She smiled, slow and deliberate, before taking a sip of her drink. "Oh, Ryan, you're smart enough to have figured that out already." He shifted uncomfortably. The memory of their last conversation at the gala still clung to him, the way she had planted that seed in his mind. Ryan had told himself he wouldn't come. He had no business being here. But when she had sent him a message, a simple, "Come see me, let's talk," he hadn't hesitated. Vanessa sauntered over to the couch, crossing her legs as she studied him. "Tell me, Ryan, do you love your wife?" Ryan stiffened. His grip on the glass tightened. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one," she said, tilting her head. "You've been married, what, 4 years? 5? She hummed. "And yet here you are, sitting in my penthouse drinking my whiskey, instead of at home with her." Ryan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "This is just business." Vanessa let out a soft laugh. "Oh, darling, everything is business." She leaned forward, placing her glass on the table between them. "Let's not waste time. I have a proposition for you." Ryan forced a smirk. "You mean a job?" "Better." Vanessa let the silence stretch before she spoke again. "I can make you rich, Ryan." He frowned, leaning back. "And what exactly would I have to do for that?" Her eyes flickered with amusement. "Leave your wife." Ryan let out a short laugh. It was a joke. It had to be. But Vanessa just watched him, her expression unreadable. The laugh died in his throat. "You're serious?" he asked, voice lower now. "Completely." Ryan scoffed, shaking his head. "That's insane." "Is it?" She stood, walking towards the window, her silhouette illuminated against the city skyline. "I've seen men destroy their marriages for far less. A meaningless affair, a stupid impulse." She turned back to him. "At least this way, you'd walk away with something real." Ryan stared at her. "You want me to leave Elena for money?" Vanessa smiled like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Not just money, darling. Security, success, power." She took slow steps toward him, her voice like silk. "Do you know what men like you waste their lives on? Love. The idea that struggle makes love stronger, that poverty means loyalty." She leaned down, resting her hand lightly on his shoulder. "But love doesn't pay bills, Ryan. Love won't get you out of that cramped apartment or stop your wife from worrying about money every time she buys groceries." Ryan's chest tightened. She was cutting into him, peeling him open in ways he wasn't ready for. He forced himself to speak. "Elena and I are barely surviving." Vanessa finished for him. He opened his mouth, then closed it. She was right. He hated that she was right. Vanessa straightened, walking back to the bar. "You don't have to decide now," she said, pouring herself another drink. "But I'll sweeten the deal." She turned back to him, her voice softer. "Get her pregnant first." Ryan's blood ran cold. "What?" Vanessa smiled, slow and deliberate. "Give her what she wants. A baby, then leave." She shrugged as if she were discussing the weather. "She'll be fine. Women like her always are. They pick up the pieces, raise their child, and move on." She gestured around the penthouse. "Meanwhile, you'll never have to worry about another bill again." Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was, a small, ugly part of him wasn't just listening, it was considering it. He hated himself for it. Ryan lay on his back, eyes fixed on the water stain in the corner of the ceiling. He could hear Elena's gentle exhales beside him, the steady rhythm of someone lost in sleep, someone at peace. He turned his head slightly, just enough to see her face illuminated by the faint city glow. She looked so serene, her dark lashes resting against her cheeks, her lips slightly parted. She had always slept like this, completely unguarded, as if the world could never touch her, as if she had never considered, even for a second, that the person lying next to her might one day destroy her. Ryan swallowed hard, his fingers curling against the sheets. She trusted him. That was the worst part of it. She had never blamed him for their struggles, never made him feel like less of a man because they couldn't afford the life he wanted to give her. She had reassured him, held him, kissed him like nothing else mattered. And now, he was about to take everything she had ever given him and spit it back in her face. His jaw clenched as he stared up at the ceiling again. The deal was already made, wasn't it? Vanessa had laid out the terms. All he had to do was follow through. It sounded simple when she said it. Give her what she wants, a baby, then leave. But here, in this quiet room, with Elena's warmth so close, it didn't feel simple. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing he was about to jump, knowing there was no way to undo it. Elena wanted a baby. She had always wanted a baby. He had seen it in the way her eyes softened whenever they passed by a stroller on the street, in the way she lingered in the baby aisle at the grocery store. running her fingers over the tiny clothes with that quiet, wistful smile. She had never pushed him, never pressured him, but he knew, and now he was about to give her what she wanted. Not out of love, out of greed. A sick feeling coiled in his stomach, spreading through his veins like something rotten, but he had made his choice. Ryan exhaled, slowly, deeply, as if trying to rid himself of the weight pressing against his ribs. Then, carefully, he shifted closer to Elena, his hand brushing against her arm. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. He leaned in, pressing his lips against her forehead. It was instinctive, automatic, but the second he did it, something inside him twisted violently. This wasn't the kiss of a loving husband. It was a farewell. Elena had been restless all morning, pacing around their small apartment, touching the edge of the counter, rearranging the same stack of magazines on the coffee table over and over again. She had woken up feeling different that day. Not sick, not tired, just full. She had waited until Ryan got home, telling herself she wanted to do this right. It had to be special. Now she stood in the middle of their tiny living room, her heart thudding in her chest, as she watched Ryan kick off his shoes near the door. His shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He looked tired. Maybe that's why she hesitated for a second, her fingers tightening around the little plastic stick hidden behind her back. But then he looked up at her, his gaze softening just slightly, and she decided, no, this was good news. The best news. This would change everything. Ryan, she started, shifting on her feet. He let out a low sigh. Yeah. She bit her lip, then pulled the test from behind her back and held it up between them. For a second, Ryan didn't react. He just stood there, staring at the two pink lines, his expression unreadable. You're pregnant? Elena let out a small, breathless laugh. Yeah. She had imagined this moment so many times, how he would scoop her up in his arms, spin her around, bury his face in her neck as they laughed together, cried together. But Ryan just stood there and smiled. It was the same smile he gave his boss when he was pretending to agree with something he hated. The same smile he wore when they ran into old friends he didn't care about. Fake. Something cold trickled down Elena's spine, but she shoved it aside, telling herself she was overthinking it. He was probably just shocked. That was normal, right? This was big news. He needed a second. She stepped closer, taking his hands in hers, squeezing gently. I know it's sooner than we planned, but, Ryan, we're gonna have a baby. His fingers twitched in her grasp. And then, as if snapping out of a daze, Ryan let out a short breath and nodded. Yeah, that's... wow. But there was no excitement in his voice. No warmth, just acceptance. A transaction completed. A deal sealed. Elena forced herself to smile, even as something in her stomach twisted uncomfortably. She told herself it was just nerves, that she was reading too much into things. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than usual. Ryan leaned against the mirrored walls, staring at his own reflection, at the tired eyes that had darkened over the past few weeks. His shirt was crisp, his jacket expensive. Vanessa had sent it to him, along with a pair of sleek cufflinks he didn't even know how to put on properly. A taste of the life she had promised, a life he was stepping into. The doors slid open, revealing the lavish suite beyond. It was a world far removed from the one he had left behind a few hours ago. From the scent of home-cooked pasta Elena had made, from the way she had rested her head against his shoulder, murmuring about baby names. He stepped inside, his shoes sinking into the plush carpet, and there she was, Vanessa. Ryan. Her voice was a purr, thick with satisfaction. I was beginning to wonder if you'd changed your mind. It's done, he said, his voice quieter than he intended. Vanessa's smile widened as she stood, making her way toward him with slow, deliberate steps. So she's pregnant? Ryan gave a tight nod, feeling the weight of the words settle over him. Yeah. Vanessa's fingertips traced the lapel of his jacket, smoothing out an invisible crease. Good boy. Something about the way she said it sent a shiver down his spine, like he was a well-trained pet, following orders. He pulled back slightly, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, he exhaled sharply, shaking his head. I don't know if I can actually go through with... Before he could finish, Vanessa let out a soft, almost amused laugh. Ryan, darling, she said smoothly, don't start second-guessing now. You came to me because you wanted more, and you've already made your choice, haven't you? Vanessa lifted the glass to her lips, studying him over the rim. Let me guess, she was happy, overjoyed, maybe even cried a little? Vanessa took his silence as confirmation. Of course she was. Women like Elena, they think love is enough. They think struggle is noble. She rolled her eyes, taking a sip. But you and I both know better, don't we? She reached up, her fingers brushing against the side of his face before trailing down to the front of his shirt. You think she'd hesitate if the roles were reversed? She murmured. Ryan's stomach twisted. Elena isn't like that. Vanessa chuckled, the sound low and rich. Oh, Ryan. Her lips curled into a smirk as she leaned in, close enough that he could feel her breath against his skin. That's what makes this so easy. He wanted to argue, to push back, to tell her that he wasn't as far gone as she thought. But then she kissed him. Slow, deliberate, and just like that, whatever was left of the man who once swore he would never betray his wife disappeared. That night at their quiet apartment, Elena sat at the kitchen table, her fingers gripping a small slip of paper so tightly that it crumpled in her grasp. Her heart was pounding, her breathing uneven, but she remained still. The name of the upscale restaurant at the top mocked her. She had never been there. The date was just 2 nights ago, a night when Ryan had told her he was working late, and at the bottom, as if to carve the betrayal into stone, was the tip line, signed in fluid, elegant handwriting, Vanessa. Elena felt her stomach twist. For the past few weeks she had noticed the changes in him, the detachment, the way he would pull away when she reached for his hand. She had told herself it was stress, that maybe he was feeling overwhelmed with the baby on the way. She had convinced herself, begged herself, to believe that. But now, she could see the truth staring back at her in black and white. The scrape of a key turning in the lock jolted her from her thoughts. The door swung open, and Ryan stepped inside, his movements sluggish. His jacket was slung over his shoulder, his tie loosened, his shirt slightly wrinkled. He hadn't been at work. Elena just watched him, her hands resting on the table, the crumpled receipt tucked beneath her palm. Ryan didn't notice her at first. Long day, he muttered, setting his keys down on the counter before finally looking toward her. The moment their eyes met, something shifted. His tired expression turned guarded, his gaze flickering to the table, to the single slip of paper in front of her. "When were you going to tell me?" Ryan's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He didn't answer. Elena inhaled sharply, forcing herself to stay calm. "I waited," she continued, her fingers tightening over the receipt. "I told myself I was imagining things, that you were just stressed, that things would get better." Her voice broke slightly, but she steadied herself. "But you were never going to tell me, were you?" Ryan exhaled through his nose, his expression hardening. "Elena, Don't!" She cut him off, shaking her head. "Don't lie to me. Not now." He ran a hand down his face, dragging in a slow breath. "It's complicated." Elena let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, Ryan, it's simple. You cheated." He flinched, his jaw tightening. "It wasn't." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "I didn't mean for—" Elena slammed the receipt onto the table, shoving it toward him. "Don't you dare stand there and act like this was a mistake." Her voice trembled with the weight of her emotions. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is leaving the stove on. This was a choice." Ryan looked away, staring at the wall like he was searching for an escape. Elena let out a shaky breath, pressing her fingers against her temples. "Was it worth it?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Whatever she gave you, was it worth throwing away our life? Our baby?" His gaze flicked back to her at that, something flickering in his eyes. Guilt, but it was dull, buried under layers of something else, something colder. "Elena, you don't understand," he muttered. "Then help me. Help me understand why my husband, the man I love, the father of my child, is sneaking around with another woman." Ryan didn't answer, and that silence, that unbearable, suffocating silence, was her answer. She pushed back from the table, rising to her feet, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Just tell me the truth, Ryan." Ryan's fingers twitched toward his pocket. He reached for his keys. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. "You're leaving." Ryan didn't answer. "Wow, that's it then. You get caught, and instead of fighting for us, you just walk away?" He turned toward the door, gripping the handle. "I need to think." Elena felt something inside her shatter. "Think?" Her voice rose slightly, raw and uneven. "You've had weeks to think. You had time to sneak around behind my back. You had time to—" She stopped herself, her hands trembling as she wrapped them protectively around her stomach. Her voice softened, breaking apart. "What about our baby, Ryan?" He hesitated, his shoulders stiffening, but he didn't turn around. She took a step forward. "Look at me." Ryan's fingers tightened on the doorknob. "Look at me." Slowly, painfully, he turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. Elena searched his face, desperate for something, anything, that told her this wasn't real, that the man standing in front of her was still the same man she had fallen in love with, the man she had built a life with. But there was nothing left of that man. Her lower lip trembled, and she bit down on it to keep herself from crying. "Please don't do this," she whispered. Ryan's gaze flickered to the floor. "I'm sorry, Elena." The words felt like a knife to the chest, and then, just like that, he opened the door and stepped out. Elena stood frozen as the door clicked shut behind him. The apartment felt colder, empty. He was gone, and this time, he wasn't coming back. The apartment felt hollow, like an abandoned shell of a life she had once known. The silence pressed against her, thick and unbearable, where his laughter, his footsteps, his presence had once made this place feel like home. Now, all that remained was the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor beneath her bare feet. Elena sat curled up on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, an ultrasound photo clutched tightly in her trembling hands. She had been staring at the grainy black and white image, tracing the faint outline of her baby over and over again with her fingertips, as if memorizing it would somehow ground her. She had imagined this moment so differently. She had imagined his excitement, his protective hand resting on her stomach, his whispered promises of the future they would build together. She had thought he would cry when he saw their child for the first time. She had thought he would be proud, but instead, she had come home to an empty apartment. Her throat ached as she swallowed back a sob, pressing her palm against her belly. She had begged him. She had given him every chance, every possible reason to choose them, and yet, he had still walked away. Her body trembled as she exhaled shakily, and then, a knock at the door cut through the silence. Elena didn't move. Another knock, this time louder. "Elena," a familiar voice called. "It's me. Open the door." Her breath caught. "Mom." Slowly, she forced herself to stand, her legs feeling weak beneath her. She hadn't even realized how long she had been sitting there, lost in the haze of her own heartbreak. She wiped at her face, knowing it was no use. Her eyes were swollen, her cheeks stained with tears that had dried hours ago. She hesitated for a moment, then unlocked the door. Margaret stepped inside the apartment like a force of nature, her sharp eyes immediately scanning the space, taking in the half-empty bottles of water on the coffee table, the crumpled tissues scattered across the floor, and most of all her daughter, a ghost of the strong, vibrant woman she had raised. "Elena," Margaret said softly, stepping forward. And that was all it took. Elena broke. A sob tore from her throat as she collapsed into her mother's arms, her body trembling with the force of her grief. Margaret held her tightly, one hand smoothing over her hair, the other gripping her back like she could physically keep her from shattering completely. "Shh, baby," Margaret whispered. "I'm here." Elena clung to her, her breath coming in uneven gasps. He left, Mom," she choked out. He just left." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, her jaw tightening. "I know," she murmured. "I know, sweetheart." For a long time they just stood there, Margaret holding her daughter as she let everything out. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, everything she had been keeping locked inside since the moment Ryan walked out. When the sobs finally quieted, Margaret guided Elena to the couch, keeping an arm around her as they sat. She reached over and picked up the ultrasound photo that had slipped from Elena's hands onto the cushion. Margaret studied the image for a long moment before exhaling. "This baby," she said softly, placing the photo gently back into Elena's palm. "This baby is yours, Elena, and you don't have to do this alone." Elena's lips trembled. "But I am alone," she whispered. Margaret turned to face her fully, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. "No," she said, her voice steady, firm. "You are not alone. You have me, you have your family, and you have a little life inside of you that is going to need you to be strong." Elena swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the ultrasound. "I don't know if I can do this." Margaret straightened, a determined look settling onto her face. "Then I'll help you," she said without hesitation. "We will figure it out together." Elena stared at her mother, searching for even the slightest doubt, but there was none. Margaret reached for Elena's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We don't let men like Ryan destroy us," she said quietly but fiercely. "We rebuild, we survive, and one day, we thrive." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek, but this time, it wasn't just grief, it was something else, something small, but present. Hope. Ryan exhaled as he stepped into Vanessa's penthouse. The moment should have felt victorious. This was the life he had been dreaming about, wasn't it? He dropped his bag near the entrance, staring at the place that was now his new home. "So," she murmured, handing him a glass. "How does it feel, Mr. Lawson?" Ryan took the glass, rolling the stem between his fingers before taking a sip. "Feels right," he lied. Vanessa chuckled, stepping closer, her manicured nails grazing down his chest before she took the glass from his hand and set it aside. "Good," she whispered, leaning in until her lips brushed against his ear. "Because this is just the beginning." Ryan let out a slow breath, closing his eyes for a brief second. He forced himself to nod again, this time more firmly. Vanessa pulled away, pleased, before she made her way to the couch, draping herself lazily across the cushions. She picked up the remote and pressed a button, and suddenly, soft jazz filled the room. The music, the dim lighting, the warmth of the champagne settling in his chest. It should have been perfect, but something inside him felt unbearably heavy. A single thought clawed its way into his mind, uninvited. Elena. At that exact moment, she was sitting alone in their apartment. No, her apartment now, the one they had built a life in. Now, there was no one to hold her. Ryan, Vanessa called, her voice smooth but firm. He turned his head, finding her watching him intently from the couch. Come sit, she said, patting the space beside her. He hesitated for half a second before making his way over. Vanessa shifted, draping her legs over his lap like she had already claimed him. Relax, she purred, running a hand up his arm. You're acting like you lost something. Ryan let out a forced chuckle, shaking his head. Not at all. Good, she mused, tilting her head as she studied him. Because you haven't. You've only gained. The sun was warm on Ryan's skin as he lounged on the deck of Vanessa's private yacht, a glass of whiskey in one hand, the salty breeze ruffling his neatly pressed linen shirt. Everything about this moment screamed luxury, something he had once only imagined, but never thought he'd actually live. Vanessa sat across from him, sipping a cocktail, her oversized sunglasses hiding her eyes, but Ryan knew she was watching him. She always was. You're getting used to this, aren't you? She said, her voice smooth, knowing. Ryan smirked, lifting his glass in a mock toast. Hard not to, he admitted, taking a slow sip. Vanessa smiled, pleased. Good, she murmured, because this is what you deserve. Everything about his life had changed, and yet something felt off. He wasn't sure when he started noticing it, the way Vanessa handled him, not as a lover, not even as an equal, but as something she owned. At first it was subtle, a suggestion here, a casual command there. Wear this suit, take this watch, don't order that, try this instead. Then it became something more. Vanessa had rules about who he talked to, what events he attended, even what he posted online. You're not just some man anymore, Ryan, she had told him one night, draping a sleek tailored jacket over his shoulders before they left for a high-profile dinner. You're mine, and that comes with an image to uphold. At the time, he had laughed it off. Mine. It had sounded playful, almost flattering, but now, as he sat across from her, watching the way she examined him like an expensive purchase, he wasn't sure if he liked it anymore. The truth was, he wasn't in control. The credit cards he used, Vanessa's name was on them. The penthouse he lived in, Vanessa owned it. Even the damn suit he was wearing, Vanessa had picked it out. She paid. She decided. She dictated. Ryan shifted in his seat, suddenly feeling suffocated despite the open sea around him. You're quiet, Vanessa observed, setting her glass down. Something on your mind? Ryan hesitated. If he told her the truth, that this life, as lavish as it was, felt empty, she'd laugh. She'd tell him he was being dramatic, that he had everything a man could want, and only a fool would question it. So he forced a grin, leaning back in his chair, just taking it all in. Vanessa studied him for a moment, then smirked. Good boy. He hated that. The words, the tone, like he was some pet she had trained, and yet he said nothing. Because what was the alternative? Going back? Back to that tiny apartment? Back to bills piling up? Back to a life where he was always chasing, always losing? No, he had made his choice, and now he had to live with it. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Elena sat stiffly in one of the uncomfortable chairs, her hands folded over her growing belly. This was just a routine checkup, nothing alarming, nothing to worry about. The baby was growing well, and every time she felt the tiny flutters inside her, she was reminded that she wasn't alone. Her fingers instinctively traced small circles against the fabric of her dress. She wondered if Ryan had even thought about her today. She exhaled sharply, pressing her lips together. She refused to let herself go down that road again. She had wasted too many nights staring at the ceiling, replaying memories that no longer meant anything. The door to the office opened, and a nurse stepped out, calling her name. Elena Carter? She pushed herself up, smoothing out her dress before making her way inside. The room was warmer than the waiting area, with soft lighting that attempted to make the space feel less clinical. A medical degree hung on the wall behind the desk, the name Dr. Daniel Everett printed in bold silver lettering beneath the frame. She had never met this doctor before. Her usual physician was out on leave, so she had been reassigned for today's visit. Miss Carter, a voice greeted her as she stepped inside. She turned, her gaze meeting a pair of warm brown eyes. The man sitting behind the desk was younger than she expected, probably mid-30s. His sleeves were rolled up slightly, exposing strong forearms, and a watch sat comfortably against his wrist, understated but elegant. Please have a seat, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him as he stood, offering a handshake. She hesitated for half a second before accepting it. His grip was firm, reassuring. I know switching doctors unexpectedly can be frustrating, he continued, offering her a polite smile as he glanced at her file. But I promise, you're in good hands. She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. I see here you're about 22 weeks along. How have you been feeling? Any nausea still lingering? Dizziness? She shook her head. No, it's been better. Good. Any changes in appetite, sleep? A small, humorless laugh escaped her. Sleep is a work in progress. Dr. Everett smiled slightly, leaning back in his chair. That's pretty normal. Pregnancy comes with its fair share of restless nights. He paused for a moment, then softened his tone. But it's not just the physical side, is it? Her posture stiffened slightly. She hadn't expected him to ask that. Doctors didn't usually ask about the emotional part of things. They focused on blood pressure, vitamin levels, fetal development, not the moments where she lay awake at night, staring at the empty space beside her, wondering how she was going to raise a baby alone. Dr. Everett must have noticed her hesitation, because he didn't push. Instead, he simply said, "You don't have to answer if you don't want to. But if you ever need to talk about more than just the medical side of things, I'm here." She exhaled slowly, forcing a small nod. "Thanks." He nodded in return, and continued with the checkup, guiding her through the usual routine. He asked her about the baby's movements, measured her belly, and reassured her that everything was progressing well. And for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Maybe it was his voice, low and even. Maybe it was the way he didn't rush her, didn't treat her like she was just another patient in a long line of appointments. Or maybe it was just that she had spent so long feeling invisible that, sitting here in this office, being spoken to like she actually mattered, felt like a foreign but desperately needed experience. At the end of the appointment, as she adjusted her coat, Dr. Everett hesitated before speaking. "Elena," he said carefully, as if choosing his words, "do you have support?" The question took her by surprise. She blinked, her fingers tightening slightly around the fabric of her sleeve. "I mean," he continued, "do you have people looking out for you? Family? Friends?" Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't know what to say. Did she? Margaret was there, of course. Her mother had been her rock through all of this, and she had a few friends who checked in on her, but they had their own lives, their own families. Her husband was gone. The father of her child had walked away. She forced a smile. "I'll be fine." Dr. Everett studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." But something in his expression told her he didn't quite believe her. As she reached for the door handle, his voice stopped her. "Elena?" She turned. "If you ever need anything," he said, his gaze steady, "don't hesitate to ask." She swallowed, unsure why his words made her throat feel tight. "Thanks, Dr. Everett. Call me Daniel," he corrected gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "Thanks, Daniel." And for the first time in a long time, as she stepped out of the office and into the cool air of the afternoon, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she thought. The penthouse no longer felt like home. Ryan had once reveled in its luxury, but now it all felt cold. Or maybe that was just him. Vanessa had been distant for weeks, her attention slipping away like sand through his fingers. At first he told himself it was nothing. She was a busy woman, always juggling business deals, events, and extravagant vacations. But then he started noticing the way she looked through him, instead of at him, how her once playful smirks had turned into dismissive nods. And then there was him. The first time Ryan saw the younger man, it was at one of Vanessa's exclusive cocktail parties. He had been standing by the bar, nursing a drink he no longer enjoyed, when he spotted her across the room. She was laughing, her manicured fingers brushing against the arm of a boy who couldn't have been older than 25. His suit was sharp, his jawline even sharper, and he had that same wide-eyed admiration for Vanessa that Ryan himself once had. The realization sank in slow, like poison in his veins. It wasn't just a casual flirtation. Vanessa had a new pet. Ryan clenched his jaw, gripping his glass a little too tightly as he watched her lean in, whisper something in the young man's ear, and then laugh. That same sultry laugh she used to save for Ryan. Something inside him twisted painfully. He waited for her to look at him, to acknowledge him, but she never did. The days that followed were worse. Vanessa became even more absent, her excuses growing thinner by the minute. She stopped inviting him to meetings, stopped asking for his opinion, stopped pretending that he was anything more than another past indulgence. Ryan tried to convince himself that it didn't matter, that he still had her, that she wasn't done with him yet. Then one night, he came home to find his things packed, suitcases stacked neatly by the grand staircase, his designer suits, the expensive watches she had gifted him, the shoes he had once taken so much pride in, all stuffed into luggage, as if he was nothing more than an afterthought. Vanessa stood by the sleek black piano, sipping a glass of red wine, her gaze cool and unreadable. His stomach dropped. What is this?" His voice came out hoarse, almost foreign to him. Vanessa didn't even look up. "I thought it was obvious." Ryan stared at her, his chest tightening. "You're kicking me out?" She finally turned her head, her expression indifferent, as if he were nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "Ryan, darling, let's not be dramatic." He let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "Dramatic? You promised me a future. You said..." "Oh, please." Vanessa rolled her eyes and took another slow sip of wine. Don't embarrass yourself. You knew exactly what this was. Ryan's fingers curled into fists. He felt sick. You used me, he whispered, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. Vanessa smirked. And you used me. His heart pounded violently against his ribs. I left my wife for you. Vanessa arched a brow, finally setting her wine down on the glass table beside her. Yes, she said smoothly, and that was your mistake. Ryan's breath hitched. Her words cut deeper than he thought possible. She stepped toward him, her expensive perfume suffocating. You should have known better, she murmured, her voice laced with condescension. Men like you're fun for a while, but you're replaceable. Ryan's jaw locked, shame burning through him. He had thought he was different. He had thought he was special, but he was just another disposable toy in her collection. A sleek sports car pulled up outside, the sound of an engine humming through the open balcony doors. Ryan turned his head toward the entrance, and his stomach churned when he saw him step inside. The young man from the party. Vanessa smiled at him, a smile Ryan hadn't seen in weeks. Ah, she sighed, looking back at Ryan with faux sympathy. I think that's your cue. Ryan's breath came fast and uneven, his chest rising and falling in anger, in humiliation, in a deep, soul-crushing regret that threatened to consume him whole. He turned his gaze back to her, searching for anything, a flicker of the woman he had once thought he mattered to, but she was already done with him. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to swallow back the bitter lump in his throat. Without another word, he grabbed his suitcases, what little he had left, and walked past her. She didn't stop him. She didn't even watch him go. The wind was sharp that evening, cutting through Ryan's thin jacket as he walked aimlessly down the crowded streets. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, not because of the cold, but because they were empty. No keys, no wallet, no purpose. He had been everything once, at least in his own mind. He had walked these streets before in $1,000 suits, slipping into luxury cars without a second thought. He had sipped fine whiskey at rooftop bars, believing he had won. But now he had nothing. His reflection in a storefront window startled him. The man looking back wasn't the Ryan he remembered. His hair was unkempt, his face hollowed by sleepless nights and empty stomachs. His clothes, once carefully pressed and reeking of expensive cologne, were wrinkled and dull. He looked like a man who had lost, and maybe that's because he had. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. He had bigger problems than hunger. No job, no place to sleep. He'd crashed on a friend's couch for a few nights, but even they had started avoiding his calls. Who wanted to keep a man around who couldn't even buy himself dinner? He sighed, rubbing a hand down his face, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. The streets were buzzing with people, laughter, conversations, life moving forward while he stood still. Couples walked past him, hand in hand, lost in their own little worlds. Parents pushed strollers, their toddlers giggling as they reached for colorful window displays. And then he saw her, Elena. Ryan froze mid-step, his breath catching painfully in his throat. She stood outside a baby boutique, the glow of the shop's golden lights reflecting in her soft brown hair. Her hand rested on her belly, which had grown rounder since the last time he had seen her. She was radiant, more beautiful than he remembered, but she wasn't alone. Daniel. Ryan recognized him immediately, even before the man turned and said something that made Elena laugh. A soft, genuine laugh Ryan hadn't heard in months, maybe longer. Daniel had a hand resting protectively on her lower back, guiding her gently toward the window display. They were looking at baby clothes. Ryan's gut twisted violently. He should have been the one standing next to her, picking out tiny onesies and socks that were too small to be real. Ryan's fingers clenched into fists as he forced himself to move closer, drawn in by some twisted, masochistic need to see, to know if he had been completely erased from her life. Inside the boutique, Elena picked up a tiny white onesie with blue stars, her eyes soft with emotion. She turned to Daniel, holding it up. Daniel smiled, nodding. Then, without hesitation, he reached into his wallet and handed his credit card to the cashier. Ryan felt sick. That should have been him. He took a step back, gripping a nearby lamppost as his world tilted. The street noises faded, the people around him blurred. All he could see was them, a perfect picture of what could have been. No, what should have been. Daniel leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to Elena's forehead before wrapping an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. She melted into him, resting her head against his chest. It was so natural, so right. Ryan's breath came in short, painful bursts. She had moved on. She had found someone who deserved her. The rain had started an hour ago, a slow, steady drizzle that seeped into Ryan's clothes, clinging to his skin like a second layer of regret. He barely felt it. His knuckles hovered over the door, trembling slightly. He'd been standing there for what felt like forever, staring at the peeling paint on the old wooden frame, trying to work up the courage to knock. What if she didn't open? What if she did? The last time he had walked out of this apartment, he had been a different man, a man who thought he was winning, who thought he was too good for this small, simple life. He had shut the door on his wife, the woman who had loved him, and now he was back, broke, desperate. He forced his hand forward and knocked. Once, twice, silence. His heart pounded as he listened for movement inside. A part of him prayed she wasn't home. That would be easier. He could walk away, tell himself he tried, and pretend he hadn't come crawling back like a pathetic broken man. But then, footsteps. His breath caught. The doorknob turned, and there she was, Elena. Ryan felt like the air had been stolen from his lungs. She looked different, not just physically. She was glowing, her skin soft and warm despite the exhaustion in her eyes. But it wasn't just the pregnancy. She felt different, stronger. Ryan opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat. Elena didn't speak. She didn't slam the door, didn't scream at him, or cry, or demand to know why he was here. She just looked at him, and that was worse, because there was nothing there. Elena, his voice cracked. I know I don't deserve to be here. I know I messed up. A sharp slap cut him off. Ryan stumbled back, his cheek stinging, the taste of metal bursting in his mouth. His head snapped to the side from the force of it. For a moment, everything was silent. Then slowly, he looked up, but it wasn't Elena standing there anymore. It was Margaret. Her hand was still raised, her fingers shaking from the impact. Her face was tight with rage, but her eyes, were filled with something even more terrifying, disgust. How dare you? Her voice was low, deadly. Ryan swallowed hard. I just wanted to... No. She shook her head, stepping closer, pushing him back with nothing but her presence. You do not get to come back here and act like you deserve to even breathe in her direction. Ryan's mouth went dry. What? You just realized you ruined your own life? Margaret spat. You just figured out that you walked away from the best thing that ever happened to you? That you left her to raise a child alone? Ryan flinched. I wasn't thinking. His voice trailed off because what excuse could he possibly give? Margaret let out a bitter laugh. No, Ryan. You were thinking. You were thinking about yourself. And now that you've lost everything, you think you can show up here, like some lost puppy, and what? Be forgiven? Ryan's throat felt tight. I wanted to see her. Margaret stared at him for a long time, then shook her head. No, that single word hit harder than the slap. Ryan's chest tightened, his hands clenched at his sides. Elena, he turned to her now, pleading, because she had to listen to him. She had to still care. Please, I don't expect you to take me back. I don't. I need you to know how sorry I am. I made a mistake. I was a fool, and I love you. I never stopped loving you. For a flicker of a second, something flashed in Elena's eyes. A memory, a pain, and then, just as quickly, it was gone. You love me? Her voice was soft. Was that before or after you walked out on me? Before or after you chose money over our family? Margaret took a step forward. Where were you? She whispered. Ryan had no answer. Margaret's voice rose, her fury bubbling over. Where were you when she was crying herself to sleep at night? Where were you when she sat alone in a hospital room, hearing your child's heartbeat for the first time? Where were you when she needed you? Ryan swallowed, his hands shaking. You were with her. The words cut. You were with your mistress, Margaret spat. Spending her money, drinking her wine, sleeping in her bed while my daughter was here, alone, carrying your child. Ryan felt his entire body go cold. Margaret's lip curled. You are nothing to us, Ryan. He flinched. Elena, no. Elena finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm, and it was that quietness that broke him, because there was no hope in it, no pain, just finality. I begged you to stay, she whispered. I begged you and you walked away. Ryan's throat closed. Elena's gaze didn't waver. So now, I'm asking you to do the same. The door closed. The sharp pain ripped through Elena's body, forcing a gasp from her lips as she gripped the edge of the couch. A second wave of pain hit, stronger this time. Her fingers dug into the fabric, her forehead damp with sweat. Elena? Margaret's voice snapped her out of it. Elena opened her mouth, trying to speak, but another contraction tore through her body, leaving her breathless. Margaret knew. Without hesitation, she grabbed her phone. I'm calling Daniel. We're going to the hospital. Elena barely nodded, exhaling shakily as she tried to ride out the pain. It was happening. It was too fast, too soon, but she didn't have time to think. The next few minutes were a blur of movement. Margaret grabbing Elena's hospital bag, slipping shoes onto her daughter's feet, supporting her as she struggled to stand. By the time they reached the front door, the familiar sound of Daniel's car pulling up filled the night air. The door flew open. Daniel rushed inside. Elena? His gaze fell on her immediately, his brow creasing as he took in the sight of her. Pale, shaking, breathless. He was beside her in seconds, one arm wrapped firmly around her waist, steadying her. "I've got you," he murmured. "Let's go." The drive to the hospital was chaos. Elena barely registered the city lights flashing past the windows, the sound of the tires screeching against the pavement. She could hear Margaret in the front seat, telling Daniel to hurry, while Daniel kept one hand on the wheel and the other reaching back, squeezing Elena's hand. It felt like forever, but suddenly, they were there. Bright white lights, the harsh smell of antiseptic, the distant hustle of nurses and doctors moving through the emergency room. The doors flew open. "We need assistance," Daniel called, his voice strong, urgent. A nurse was already moving toward them, assessing Elena, as Daniel and Margaret helped her out of the car. "She's in labor. It's coming fast," Margaret added, her voice unwavering despite the tension in the air. A wheelchair appeared. Elena was lowered into it, another contraction stealing her breath as the nurses started rolling her toward the delivery wing. Daniel stayed close, keeping his hand on her shoulder, his presence grounding her. Elena barely had time to process everything happening at once. The voices, the movement, the paperwork being pushed toward Margaret, the nurse asking her how far apart the contractions were, and then, Ryan found out. It came in the form of a frantic phone call. A friend, maybe. Someone who had seen Margaret and Daniel rushing Elena into the hospital and had decided that despite everything, Ryan deserved to know. He was already drunk when he got the call, sitting alone in some cheap motel room, nursing the last bottle of whiskey he could afford. But the moment he heard the words, "Elena's in the hospital, she's having the baby," the haze in his mind vanished. He shot up from the bed, the bottle shattering as it slipped from his fingers. The baby. His baby. He needed to be there. He stumbled toward the door, grabbing the only jacket he had left, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the zipper. His head was spinning, his heartbeat hammering in his chest as he tried to focus. He had to get to her. He had to fix this. He had to be there for his child. For the first time since he had left, he ran. He didn't have a car anymore. Vanessa had taken everything. His wallet was nearly empty, but he didn't care. He sprinted through the streets, feet pounding against the pavement, dodging cars, ignoring the honks and the curses thrown in his direction. The hospital was miles away, but he didn't stop. By the time he saw the bright red emergency sign glowing in the distance, his lungs were burning, his legs felt like lead, and his heart was ready to explode. But he made it. He stumbled inside, breathless, frantic. The receptionist barely glanced up. I need to see Elena," Ryan gasped, his palms slamming against the desk. "Elena Carter. She's here. She's having my baby." The woman frowned, glancing at her screen. "Sir, you need to calm down. Please," Ryan begged, his voice breaking. "I need to see her." A hand landed on his chest, firm, unmoving. Ryan's head snapped up, only to come face to face with Daniel. Ryan froze. Daniel's face was calm, but his eyes, they were anything but. "No," Daniel said simply. Ryan's stomach dropped. "Elena's in there," Ryan said, his voice low, shaking. I have to see her. You are not going near her." The words were sharp, a quiet fury behind them that made the world tilt. Ryan clenched his jaw. "She's my wife." Daniel's lip curled. "You made sure she wasn't." Ryan's breath stilled. Before he could say anything else, another voice cut through the space between them. "Get out." Ryan turned slowly. Margaret, standing a few feet away. Her arms were crossed, her shoulders rigid, but her voice was low, quiet, controlled. Ryan swallowed. "Margaret, you're too late," she said, her voice cutting through him like a knife. His heart squeezed. "Elena, she doesn't need you," Margaret interrupted. "Not anymore." Ryan felt like he couldn't breathe. Margaret's eyes were unforgiving. "You left. Stay gone." Ryan's hands shook at his sides. Ryan stood frozen in the dimly lit hospital hallway, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. His body ached from running, from desperation, from the weight of everything he had lost. He was here, standing outside like a ghost watching a life he had thrown away. Through the large glass window of the maternity ward, he saw her, Elena. She was lying in the hospital bed, her dark hair damp with sweat, exhaustion softening her features. She looked pale, drained, but she was smiling, and she wasn't alone. Ryan's stomach tightened as his eyes moved to Daniel. Daniel was standing beside her, holding the baby, Ryan's baby. Daniel was smiling down at the small, fragile bundle in his arms. His hands were steady, protective, as if he had been preparing for this moment his whole life. The baby was wrapped in a soft white blanket, barely visible, but Ryan saw the tiny fingers, the tiny chest rising and falling. His child. His. But he wasn't the one holding them. Ryan's hands trembled as he pressed them against the cold glass, his throat tightening. Daniel, rocking the baby gently, whispering something to Elena that made her laugh. Even after hours of labor, after pain and exhaustion, she was at peace. Because of him. Ryan's nails scraped against the glass. A bitter sting burned behind his eyes, but he refused to blink. He deserved to feel this. Every second of it. There was no coming back from this. This was the moment. The final, brutal moment of realization. He had lost everything. He had never felt regret so deep, so suffocating, like something sharp lodged in his ribs, cutting him open from the inside. He wanted to run into the room, wanted to demand that they let him in, that he had a right to be there. He wanted to take the baby from Daniel's arms, to hold them himself, to feel some kind of connection before it was too late, but he couldn't move. And then, Elena looked up. Ryan's breath caught. There was no shock, no anger, no sadness, just emptiness. Ryan's lips parted, as if he could somehow explain, somehow fix the unfixable, but Elena just blinked, then slowly, deliberately, turned away. Ryan stumbled back from the glass, his breath unsteady, his mind reeling. His hands, still pressed against the cold surface, slid down, leaving behind faint smudges, proof he had been there, watching, but never truly belonging. He couldn't breathe. His child, his wife, no, not his wife anymore, were just a few steps away, yet they felt like they were in another world, a world he had walked away from, and now, someone else stood in his place. His heart pounded in his chest as he forced himself to move. His pulse roared in his ears. He just needed to talk to her, to see her. He didn't have a speech prepared, didn't know what words could possibly make up for what he had done, but he had to say something. Even if she wouldn't forgive him, even if she never let him back in, he had to try. But just as he reached the doorway, just as his fingers brushed against the handle, Margaret stepped in his way again. Elena's mother. She had been waiting for him. "She doesn't need you," she said, her voice like steel. "She's finally happy. She has a man who actually loves her, who was there when you weren't. She has her baby. A baby you left." Ryan's chest caved in. Margaret's eyes locked onto his. "Stay gone." The final blow. Ryan's breath trembled as he took a slow step back. Margaret didn't move. She just watched him, waiting for him to leave, but he couldn't. That's when the door opened. Ryan's breath caught as Daniel stepped out. Daniel didn't say a word at first. Then, with a calmness that sent a fresh wave of agony through Ryan's chest, Daniel spoke. "She said you can come in." Ryan barely registered the words before Daniel stepped aside, motioning toward the open door. For a second, Ryan hesitated. His legs felt stiff, his feet suddenly too heavy to move. Then, slowly, he stepped inside. The beeping of hospital monitors filled the silence. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air. Elena didn't look up as he entered. She didn't react, didn't acknowledge him. She was completely focused on the baby, rocking gently, her fingers brushing lightly over the soft fabric of the tiny blanket. Ryan felt like a stranger in the room. He had no right to be here, but still, he forced himself forward, stopping at the foot of the bed. "Elena," his voice cracked. Finally, she looked at him. The woman in front of him now was stronger. She had rebuilt herself from the ruins he had left behind, and she didn't need him anymore. Ryan's hands shook at his sides. I'm sorry," he whispered. Elena's lips curved into a soft, humorless smile. "I know." She traced a delicate finger over the tiny, sleeping face. For a brief moment, Ryan let himself imagine what it would be like to hold his child, to be a father. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to keep looking at her, at them, the two people he had abandoned. Elena's fingers tightened around the baby's blanket. "Goodbye, Ryan." His body felt hollow as he turned away, his legs weak beneath him. He forced himself to keep walking, because there was nothing left for him here. And for the first time in his life, he finally understood. Some mistakes can't be undone.